I just realized I looks like I am stuck in a build trap back here. I've been blurred my construction projects.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you? I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, me too. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, for some of you haven't saw our big announcement, I'm super excited to welcome Melissa to Dragonboat's board advisor. I actually met Melissa through her book many years ago, and it was like, awesome book. And it's like my top recommended book to all the product managers and people wanted to, get into product management. So I'm very, very lucky to have you, Melissa, on our board and also have her here. So maybe I'll just kick you started, do a little bit intro and share with us a little bit of your background and what brought you to where you are today, Melissa.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa. I was a product manager at several companies around New York City over a decade ago. I also always kind of straddle the line between UX designer and product manager. So I have a pretty big UX design background as well. And when I was at one company called Open Sky, I started to really experiment with the ways that I was doing product management. So I got into running a lot of experiments, using a lot of data-driven product management methods there. And my boss, whose name was Chris, he encouraged me to go teach it. So that's how I got started with teaching. I used to teach on Skillshare, which was all in person back in the day before it went online. And I started teaching people about lean product management is what I called it. And over the years, as Agile started catching on and people realized that this was a critical role, more and more people started to turn to me for product management with help, which is great. And we started to realize it's not just lean product management, but it's just good product management when you look at using data-driven decision-making and a iterative process to really figure out what your customers want and make sure that you're testing things before you actually commit to it. So that's kind of how I ended up in the teaching side of things. I started consulting and playing an interim VP of product and chief product officer role with a lot of companies all over the world, which was fantastic, and speaking at conferences. I started Product Institute, which is an online school, back in 2016. And then from there, did a lot of large scale transformations with companies, everybody from Capital One to Athena Health to a lot of pretty much every bank that you've heard of, and a lot of other ones. And then in 2017 and 18, I started partnership with Insight Partners, where for the next 3 years, we were their kind of product center of excellence is what you called us. So we helped all of their SaaS growth stage companies with anything that they needed, from finding the right chief product officers to setting their strategies to implementing product operations, which became a huge passion of mine, but anything that they needed to be successful. So that's how I got really into working with a lot of the growth stage companies. And I love that part. I love setting strategy and using data for that. I think it's incredibly important. And then 3 years ago, I started working at Harvard Business School. I teach the product managers there in the MBA program. So we teach them all about the good stuff they need to know to be effective product managers before they go out in the world for those jobs. And I also run something called CPO Accelerator, Chief Product Officer Accelerator, to help a lot of the VPs and senior level product people become executives, which was a huge gap that we saw when I was working with Insight, and which I continue to see today. It's one of the most in-demand jobs. There's not enough chief product officers out there, so we're trying to make sure that everybody who has the potential to be a chief product officer gets the training that they need to be able to make that leap.
This is amazing. And more importantly, I think, is that most people go through their career working at a number of companies, really limited by the number of companies you can touch upon. And in your experience, you have worked with so many companies, the different stages, different sizes. So would love to hear a few things you mentioned about product management best practices. So maybe share with us a couple of your, what are the core, beliefs about product management that really differentiate from the ones that are not done well?
Yeah, I think for me, product management is about really optimizing this value creation system, which is we've got customers on one side, right, that need customer value. We've got businesses that provide the value to the customers through products and services. And as product managers, we need to figure out how to optimize both pieces of that. Like, how do we maximize customer value and in return get business value? To do that, you need to have like a really deep understanding of your customers. You have to be very aligned on your business goals and tracking towards them. You have to have really tight feedback loops to understand what's going on. But one of the big core tenets, I think, about product management that a lot of people just get wrong in organizations is that it's not just like a tech role. It's not an IT role. It's a business role. Like, that's why we are there. We're there to further the business through software. And there is no company out there today, I think, that can do without that. Like, every company comes back to software at the end of the day, and they rely on it to do what they need to do. There's very few companies that don't at this point. And even if you work in a company that was not a SaaS company, that's one of the things I deal with a lot with organizations. Software can make or break your strategy. Like, if you don't get on the software train, and if you don't really think about great product management, it's really possible for you to go out of business, right? Like, you need to be innovative, you need to keep up with them, but you need to see software as a core piece of your strategy. And that's how you compete in today's markets. And that's where you see like a lot of large organizations has been established for like sometimes 100 years, like insurance companies, banks, all these places are making these shifts. Their reason they need to is because all these incumbents that started with a software first approach came out there, they started building products rapidly. They kept in touch with their customers. They deeply understood what was going on with them, and they're able to produce modern products in a world where people need software to be able to do what they want to do. So these companies more than ever need to understand that software is like a business strategy. It's not just an IT strategy. It's not about saving cost. It's really about delivering maximum value to your customers in ways that we could never do it before. And that's why the product management role is so key, because we're the people who are looking at those software opportunities to really maximize the business value, right? We've got all these other players out there from sales and marketing and finance and, you know, all these other roles, but we need to be able to understand those things deeply, pull that information together, and then help craft software strategies that's just going to push us to other levels. So that's what I deeply believe about product management. I think that's where some of our misconceptions come from today about what is good product management. Some people just see it as a tech role, an IT role, like, you know, the person who just prioritizes the backlogs, and that's not true. And that's why the chief product officer role is more important than ever, why it's so in demand, because these companies, especially SaaS companies, you know, it's SaaS companies get it now. The other companies are going to follow soon. They usually follow what SaaS companies are doing, but they see this as like it's a strategic commercial role that understands technology deeply and can understand how technology can improve their commercials. And that's why we just need so many chief product officers who really get that in this modern world.
Right. I think you're so on point, where a lot of times people think about product managers thinking, oh, I do market research and I create something user love, or have something where you have a great experience. And that, you know, don't get me wrong, not all of these are essential, but they're not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is the commercial part of it, right? Any role, when you get into the C-suite, it's the business enabling role. It's not a functional role. It's the function enable the business, not the functional in the higher level of management position. So I think it is really spot on. And I would love to hear a little bit more, Melissa. It's like today, everyone talk about outcome focus, business value. So how do you see, what do you see the good way of thinking about outcome product management and focus on product management versus not?
Yeah. The two differences, outcomes versus outputs. One of the big misconceptions I think people don't understand is that, like, yes, you need outputs to get to outcomes. So we can't forget about the outputs.
Right.
But the whole idea about outcome product management is that the outcomes are the outputs are a means to an end, right? They produce an outcome. And if you're not really keeping your eye on the actual, what are we trying to achieve with this feature or product, it's really easy to get into the trap of just building and building and building.
Right.
So outcome product management is really about, like, to me, understanding deeply, like, what are our business goals? How can we achieve that through helping our customers achieve their goals? And then tying that strategy together to go towards that and monitoring, are we reaching our outcomes? How close are we in achieving our strategy? How far are we in achieving our strategy? What do we need to do to get to the next level? And that's really where outcome focused product management goes from. So it's about deeply understanding that like it doesn't really matter what we ship as long as it achieves goals. Like it has to hit the goals, otherwise it's useless.
Right. It's very interesting you mentioned that. I think more and more people start to understand that the outcomes are more important that we define on the goals. But what people now, they tend to, the pendulum sometimes to swing to the other side, say, oh, okay, we only focus on outcome, we don't think about output. But this is really important to say, hey, not only we need outcome, the output would hopefully drive to the outcome. If it didn't, we need to tweak and change how we're gonna go about it. But ultimately the delivery is essential as well. If we don't deliver the features and the outputs, so then we couldn't get outcome, right? So these two things definitely goes hand in hand. So you as you are going through a lot of product organizations, how do you see the differences in terms of process or structures and tools for like the outcome driven organization versus the ones that are more sort of the traditional feature based?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the companies start with Jira. Let's put it that way, right? Like we start with Jira. It helps us understand what's the work in progress, how do we prioritize it, where we're going from that perspective. But then there tends to be a gap, and that's why I got really excited about Dragonboat, into how do we tie all of the things that we're actually working on to what we're achieving from a strategy. And most organizations that I've worked with, and even when I've deployed strategy through organizations, there's no good place to go back and say like, how are we tracking our goals? How are we making progress towards it? What is our strategy that we can go revisit all the time and then see how all of these, 7,000 tickets that we have in Jira roll up into actually achieving that. So those things, so that piece is like a big gap that I've seen in a lot of organizations, and why I got excited about Dragonboat, because as a chief product officer, when I look at setting a strategy, I need to understand where am I in actually achieving it. So right now it's a really manual process, but the good companies, what they're doing is they are pulling data from all different systems, right? Like they are connecting their Jira into systems where they can monitor the OKRs. They've got their OKRs in a system. They're pulling the financials into it so that they can track like, what is the revenue outcomes? What are the cost outcomes into it? They're pulling together, stats from like sales and support about like win-loss analysis into these things. And they're making it a system where you can actually track what the progress is over time against a lot of different key metrics. And in product operations, when we go in and like implement this in organizations, chief product officers want to look at things like, what percentage of a customer segment is adopting different features? What percentage of our revenue is coming from which parts of the market? How does that all translate back into the priorities that we actually have for product development? That's the type of things that we want to look at. And then we also want to see how our costs are allocated per feature, per initiative, per what we're going after, and then make sure that that actually makes sense. Because that's where we start to make strategic decisions about, should we start doing this? Should we stop doing this? Should we go into a different market? Should we roll this down? Are we actually ensuring that? So those are like the absolute critical things that you need to be monitoring all the time, especially as a product leader. If you don't have the insights into that data immediately, you got to go do it manually every time. And it's so time consuming. So like the more we can adopt products like Dragonboat, where we can get that in there and be able to like open up something and just look at it real fast, the faster we can make strategic decisions. And if you are in a high growth SaaS company, like the faster you can make a decision, the better your company is, right? Like that's success right there, is being able to make a decision and run with it.
Right. I totally hear you. There's a speed and the accuracy of information is directly correlated to the speed and the quality of the decisions. So totally makes sense. And instead of you trying to spend days or weeks trying to pull things together, you don't even know they're relevant. And then the other thing you call out, I think is very interesting, is that a lot of people don't think about the terms of allocation, right? People just tend to think about prioritization, and allocation is something where, product executives, especially chief product officers, would do that all the time, right? So tell us a little bit more of, as you talking to or meet many sort of the budding CPOs, so the people on track towards that track, what are the things that they may or may not realize? This is a huge difference, right? If you're like a director of product, VP product, and there's a CPO, what's the differences of the thinking and the focus and how they can sort of make the transition and go into a different mindset?
Yeah. So when I explain like the difference between levels in product management, and also I do not like SAFE's product owner versus product manager split, which I had a very long conversation about with one of the guys who implemented it. And he helped create SAFE. It's on the podcast, Product Thinking Podcast, if you guys are interested. You have 3 different usual skill sets for a product manager, which is like tactical, operational, and strategic. Tactical is like, how do we actually build products and get it out there into the world? So working with your developers, doing the design, understanding like how to get a feature live. Then there's strategic. I'm going to skip operational and come back to it. Strategic is really like, where are we going? How are we going to achieve the vision? So long-term thinking, it's really about like, what are the big problems we can solve for customers? What markets can we enter? Do we expand geographically? It's making like trade-offs from a business level about moving a product portfolio towards a vision. And then operational connects the 2. So your operational is basically like, how do I get from tactical to strategic? And that's like all of your roadmaps and your communication and strategy deployment there. It like basically puts it into practice. Now, when you're a team level product manager, you are 90% tactical, but you need to be a little bit strategic. Like you should be strategic and operational. You got to have a little bit there to make sure that you are building the right products and to be forward thinking that way. Where I don't like SAFE is that they make it 100% tactical. There is no strategy associated with it. And product managers are usually responsible for setting the strategy and then just dictating what to build to the product owners. Don't love that. So the problem is like, if you don't actually practice your strategic skills as a team level product manager, how are you ever going to be a director of product? How are you ever going to get to the next level? And that's where I get annoyed with those distinctions. So when you're a VP of product, you are usually split 50-50, like strategic and tactical. A lot of VPs of product are really responsible for the roadmaps. They're usually solidly over at least one product line. They're figuring out how to like coach the team, get the team all going, set the strategy for one product line, expand the team, usually characterized by like a lot of hiring, train the team, and they're managing that one roadmap forward. As a chief product officer, you're usually over a portfolio of products, and that portfolio of products can be very complex. So you're also going after a lot more business focused goals, and you're usually a lot more commercial than a VP of product. So you need to deeply understand the financials of your business. You need to deeply understand how to increase your revenue, serve costs, and how different strategies get you there. Usually characterized in smaller companies, at least, by a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And you have to understand how that's going to help further your product line. And chief product officers usually see a larger scope than just product. So design sometimes reports into them. We've even had engineering report into them sometimes, only when it makes sense and when engineering is leading product and we have to correct that. So like a CPO role is way broader, way more commercial, way more financially focused than a VP of product. And it's a lot more complex, the products that you actually oversee. So the biggest hurdles that I see for people who want to go from VP to CPO is, one, understanding that like your first team is no longer just your product people. Like you can't just go super tactical into the weeds. What are we building? You have to make your first team the rest of the executives. That's usually the thing that prevents fantastic product people from becoming a chief product officer. And where I actually see a lot of people get fired from the role is they forget that like you need to go make friends with the chief revenue officer, like in the salespeople, right? Like you should be talking to them daily. And sometimes we brought up on this, like, oh, sales and product shall never meet. And like, we all hate each other. And it's like, no, that does not work anymore. You have to like talk to people, bring them together, negotiate, like get some wins with them, make friends. Like that's a huge part of being a chief product officer. So like you are at the executive table now, you have to think like an executive there, but you have to see them as your first team. You have to make sure that you are actually filling in the gaps and defining the strategy. You can't just wait for it to fall into your lap. So we say like you have to produce results. You may not have all the answers, but you got to enable yourself with enough data to make some answers. And if you can't get that data, like put the stuff in place to do it, right? Do the work. Like it's you at the end. I used to work with Shelly Perri at Insight, and she'd always say like the cavalry is not coming. Like you are the cavalry. There is no cavalry coming. Like when you're the chief product officer, that's it, right? And I think that's exactly the mentality. Like you can't wait around for somebody to tell you what to do. You got to go in there and take charge. And in companies, it's such an important thing to remember. And sorry, what I was gonna say is like it's such an important role. any company that uses software, like you're sometimes making or breaking the business strategy. If you're in a SaaS company, a lot of times the product strategy and the business strategy are super intertwined. So like you have so much responsibility to actually set this and move it forward. You got to take that responsibility.
Yeah, I totally hear you. Especially today, nothing else drives revenue, right? The product is the only thing. All you sell is the product. Then your product is the ones that driving revenue. So, and I totally hear you that I've seen some of the newly promoted chief product officers is still working with their team, still having the VP of product mindset, still has the functional mindset instead of thinking about the business level, strategy level, working with. And it's interesting to see. If you think about it, chief product officer has like two friends or two kind of challenging friends, and one is the revenue officer getting new business, and the other one is the chief customer officer, so the retention. So you kind of always kind of like, and sometimes CTOs, right? Your tech debt, you constantly have to like balance and juggle between these really competing needs across the business. So yeah, I think you're totally spot on in the observations. Do you see there are differences? Sometimes it's interesting to think about, like, if you're in a larger organization, you have dozens of product manager VPs or so on, you can have multiple portfolios of products that you really run a true portfolio. That's the one type of chief product officer. There are also sort of like a hybrid role, like multiple hats in one role. It's like if you're like the only product manager in the startup company, or maybe you're like the leader of like, sort of like a manager, director, and then you have another one or two product manager under you, even though you're not like a traditional chief product officer, you still play that role. So how do you see that kind of setup, and do you have any advice or suggestions for them to be more successful in a much smaller scope?
Yeah, I think I'd see like directors of product, when you have like a couple product managers reporting into you. That's your first, that's one of the biggest hurdles I feel like for product managers to make, is going from individual contributor to director, people overseeing. Again, all the stuff that I was just talking about for a CPO can help you really with the director of product thing too, like just thinking more commercially, more financially, getting ahead of things, not waiting for people to do that, demonstrating that you can do strategy, coaching people, even if they're not really reporting into you. That type of thing really plays well when you have when you're trying to move into a director role. For those people too, I think it's like, I see it more as you are a lot more operational and tactical, still somewhat strategic, but you are now responsible really for putting together roadmaps, crunching all the data, making sure your team has everything that you need to make decisions on there, and then enabling them to do it. So setting enough direction for your teams to actually go after. Directors of product are usually overseeing like a large feature set, or like if it's in a smaller company, sometimes like a persona, if you have very differentiated personas across the company. Let's say like you have a whole product for one persona, the whole product for the other one, it could be there too. So really just making sure the direction and the vision for what you're doing is set well, so that all of your people can go out and experiment and go around it. But so many of the things that are going to help you get to CPO will help you get to director first. So learning that, picking it up. Right. But one of the things that I would love to see all product managers do more of is just like the cross-functional collaboration. I love getting the questions on my podcast, Product Thinking. People like submit them to Dear Melissa, but so many of the questions come out to be, sales just won't listen to me, or like, I don't want to work with these people, or like, do I have to work with designers and stuff? And like, the answer is like, yes, you have to work with everybody. And that's such a key thing to doing your job well, is to get everybody on board, because like you are the steward for the outcomes. Right. And the product, if the product is producing the outcomes, you need to get everybody on board with that. So like, how do you be the evangelist for it? How do you deeply understand the goals of the people around you too? So like, what's the sales goals people are trying to meet? Like, that's probably why they're yelling at you, because they're like, have money actually tied to it, stuff like that, right? So like, the more you understand that, the easier it is for you to move up into an organization. You want to make sure that you're bringing together everybody from around the organization to move this forward. Right.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Just one last question. So, we're so excited to have you on our advisory board. And your experience working with a lot of teams, definitely seeing a variety of tools and process in the space. So, share with us a little bit of why you ultimately get behind Dragonboat.
Yeah, like I said, I was specifically, I got super excited about Dragonboat because when I was leading a transformation at Athena Health, we had 5,000 people. I was there for like a year and a half. We had 350 product managers, and I became responsible for helping to set the new strategy for the company and deploy it all the way throughout the organization. So working really closely with their chief product officer, their CEO. I was like on a flight with their CEO, trying to write the vision with them for everything. And we ran into the issue where we couldn't get the data that we needed to make the decisions that we were talking about. So like managing the portfolio became really, really hard. And we had 4 or 5 different product lines, like I said, 350 people working on different stuff. Reconciling what was going on against the goals that we were trying to hit was incredibly hard. So what did they do? Because we couldn't, this is like 2017, because we couldn't find a product that did this well, they all ended up hacking Jira together and making like SLT, senior leadership team Jira, and just putting weird numbers and stuff in there, and it didn't work. It was such a headache. And when Becky showed me Dragonboat, I was like, oh my God, this is what we needed. Like we were just missing this completely. Right. To be able to track our goals, update it or whatever. So we ended up implementing product operations there. And we had a team that would dive through the data, and they spent all day pulling all the data together, trying to get the information out of Jira, trying to reconcile all of this. And it was so much work. And we just needed help being able to make it visible so that we could make decisions in real time as an executive team. So that's why I got so excited about Dragonboat. I was like, God, I've needed this in like dozens and dozens of places. Right. I think everybody needs to be able to see the transparency that's going on with their portfolio, but it solves so many problems for senior leadership teams. And like, these are the questions they ask me every day about like, what's going on? How close are we to our goals? What is everybody doing? Should we reprioritize? And it's like, if you don't have that at your fingertips, you can't do your job. It makes it really, really hard to do your job as a senior leader.
Right. And it's totally my life story as well, from PayPal and to Shutterflies and everyone else is, one is just having visibility on what's going on. And the other one is the plan itself, right? We can't just dump everything from a strategy side of things and dump into sort of execution tool. Then you kind of completely muddy up the two sides of the word. So thank you so much for sharing, and so excited having you on our board. And I think we're coming up on time. And if anyone has more questions, please chat with us and we'll follow up with you separately.
Actually, I'm going to jump in here and give everybody a nice little present. We have an hour set aside for this conversation.
Perfect.
So that's great because we're actually getting a lot of really good Q&A coming through from the audience. So I can kind of jump over to that. Yeah. Anybody feel free to submit your Q&A. I love following along on the chat as well. Thank you, everybody. It seems, Melissa, you're quite the celebrity. People love your book. They're so excited to see you here and have the opportunity to ask you questions directly.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we got a question in. We've gotten a few questions in. I can just kind of jump into them. So how would you best convince upper management to understand the importance of becoming product-led and dedicate more focus and resources to achieving that vision of building a SaaS product?
It's one thing you have to understand is like upper management doesn't care about product. They care about reaching their business goals. So how do you explain to them how product helps them reach their business goals and how product-led helps them reach their business goals, right? Like that's the whole point. A lot of times the language that we use to communicate as product managers needs to be altered to communicate with people who don't quite understand what we're talking about. And we don't do that. We don't adjust it. Like we just like, oh, you got to do product management. You got to do all this stuff. And they're like, I don't got to do anything. I'm a leader. Like I do what I want. It's my company. But so like how I end up going in when I consult, a lot of it's like, not like a lot of times in the past, I get brought in by a product team that has the same problem you're talking about. They're like, go convince my management that we need to be product led and fix it. And it's hard, but I never start the organization, like my conversations with, hey, you need to be product led. I start with, what are your company goals? Where do you see the gaps right now? What's the problem? Oh, your teams aren't releasing fast enough. Okay, well, here's why that could be. It could be a DevOps problem. It could be a technology problem. It could be a product problem because we're not actually prioritizing things correctly. It could be a strategy problem because there's no consistent strategy and we change course all the time, which is actually more often than not, that's usually what the issue is. I said, so here's all the reasons why that could happen. I'll go find out what's going on. Oh, your strategy isn't being dictated from, a cohesive strategy. Nobody knows what you're working on. Let's go back and start there. It's like, you don't need to just like selling them on a concept doesn't usually help. Like going in and just being like, you need to be product led has never really worked for me. It's more like, what do they see as the problems and how can good product practices solve those problems? If you start there and you chip away at it, that's really what moves you into being product led. Any conversation I've seen where you go in and you just start trying to convince them on like the new trend or where you want to go, like it's failed for me. I learned not to do that pretty quickly when I was consulting. It's failed for everybody else. And I say that too, like I said, like I train like a lot of people who want to be chief product officers or are chief product officers for the first time. They go, nobody believes in this in the rest of my organization. And I say, what are you doing to make them believe, right? Because now if you are, especially if you're the VP of product or chief product officer and you are the top person now, you have to demonstrate what good looks like. Nobody's going to wait. You can't wait for buy-in. You can't just be like, oh yeah, we're going to shift to this. Just be like, what are all the goals and how do I show you that I can help you achieve your goals and the company achieve its goals by doing this well? That's what gets results. And the people I see who do that in organizations excel. Everybody wants to work with them. They go on to work in amazing places. The people who wait for somebody to give them permission to do these things well, they don't get very far because they're just not able to actually conduct it. Now, this is different than if you're a team level product manager. Sometimes you need the strategy to be able to do your job. So what I say to that is ask the questions, right? Don't sit around waiting for somebody to give you stuff to do. Like a lot of people complain, oh, my boss give me like all the features to build. They just give me a list. Every time they give you a list, go back and be like, oh, thanks so much. I just need to understand why we're building these things just so that I can make sure that I'm building it in the right way, that we're designing it in the right way, that we're reaching the right goals so I can actually monitor it. So can you give me some context onto like, how did we make these decisions and where's some of the data that I can get on the user research that was happening here? How is this going to align to our business goals? Just understand where it comes from. And once you have that understanding, you can start to piece the strategy together, but you can also start to poke holes in, okay, so like we believe that if we do X, Y, and Z, this is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, now we have a conversation. Right now we talk about what can we do next time differently so that we can ensure it happens this time. So that's a big piece of it. Like I'd say, just don't go in guns blazing because like I literally did that when I first started freelancing and consulting. It does not work. Being like, you're doing this all wrong and we got to go to product led. Like they don't care. Not their top thing, right? They're like, how do I achieve my financial responsibilities to my board, to my investors, to my stockholders, wherever you are? That's what they care about. If you can show them product helps you with that, they'll get on board.
Right. I totally agree with you that align the strategy with your boss and the outcome with your management, regardless of CEO or it is your VP product, that really makes a huge difference, especially if you back it with the data. And it's really good to become more of a collaborative relationship versus a manager and the team kind of relationship, because you say, hey, here's the goals and the other things we wanted to do, and then you can help to say, I think there are a few other things we could do, and then you can tie your goal to your managers or your client's goal so that you're on the same page. So yeah. I think that's definitely great. Obviously, you can externally say we do product-led growth. Internally, still, of what do we do to achieve our objectives faster, cheaper, and compared to existing ways of a manual or sales motion or whatnot.
Yep.
And closely tied to that, around product-led versus other parts of the organization, another question came in around many product organizations end up being very engineering-led. What can the product team do to ensure there's more balance between engineering and product?
Yeah, this is where I was talking about when I said, like, sometimes we have to put engineering under the CPO, like that we've actually done quite a bit. And that's because engineering is leading the product roadmap instead of the other way around, which is product leading the engineering roadmap. And that's what you always want. You want the second scenario, not the first. Give you a great example of what happens when engineering leads product. worked for this very large company that wanted to build a platform. They basically had everything as a big monolith in the background. They said, let's move to microservices. I'm sure everybody here is like, oh, microservices. We hear this all the time, but it's like one of the most common strategies. Let's break it up. Let's build a platform that can enable all of the building of applications on top of it. Great idea. Definitely the right move for this company. Product was over here working on the applications. The CTO actually oversaw the platform development, did not have any product managers whatsoever. They spec'd out the whole roadmap for the technology platform. They started building it. They spent something like $20 million building this platform in 1 year. Nobody used it. Nobody migrated off the monolith onto it. Why? It didn't actually match up with the product roadmap. So things they were developing to sell to customers wasn't the same services on the back end that were powering it. So they were building all this stuff that they thought was like really cool new tech and nobody was consuming it. It's the same mentality to build a platform as it is to do product management. It's like my customers are now the application teams and I need to overlay my customer facing roadmap with my backend roadmap to make sure we're building things that are actually going to be consumed and that work towards it. So that's what happens when technology leads and when product doesn't. You can't commercialize tech that nobody wants, right? Like you can't make money off of it. So in that case, what we have to align on is like, what are our business goals? And they're usually revenue or cost focused, right? They're always financially focused. And then your business goals should probably be tied to big, what I call strategic intents to get you there. So like what new markets are we entering? Are we going up market, down market, whatever? Cool. What's the product roadmap to get there? And then what's the technology roadmap to get there? You start to poke holes in it when it's super engineering focused because you go, what's the projected revenue or what's the projected cost savings, right? From all the stuff we're building over here in tech. How does that ladder up to the strategic intents? And that's like where tools like Dragonboat come in handy because you start to see all the progress that you're actually making and how many people from a capacity standpoint are working on these initiatives. And how does that relate back into actual business initiatives and where we're moving towards the business focus? So that's the conversations that get you out of a tech-led mentality. If you do have investors, those should be the questions that they're actually asking. If you're a smaller company, that's usually where these traps, a smaller company or don't have a very technical board, that's usually where these traps come from. But you have to constantly question, like, are the things that we're building going to be monetized? Like, how are they being monetized? How do they help the business? How do they help our customers?
Right. It's so funny. You just brought up two memories. And one of the example we had, not a name company, very big company. And the tech roadmap was doing a batch refactoring. So refactor all the batches. It's again, separate from the product. So when the product will release, none of the batches work because everything broken. Because they thought it just refactor everything, it's not changing everything. And then the product release is not tied to it. So like, it's a huge disaster. I roll back everything, tens of millions of dollars of things that have to be really put on pause. So later on, what we learned is to actually combine tech roadmap and the product roadmap, figure out what are the things that are driving business outcomes. And these are things that would have a synergy on how we refactor part of the platform. You don't need to do everything at once, right? You can actually chunk it up. They're tied to the revenue generating, business outcome driven kind of product roadmaps together. So, and to your point, that's actually another company I worked at. It was actually having product CPOs owns the product engineering and the product ops, so that the organization structure doesn't always matter, but in some cases it does because the workflow tend to lead that way. So it was really a good validation in terms of understanding the business outcome and understanding the product needs, and then the platform side of things is supporting that. So then you can much better allocate and sequence the work the team is going to take on.
Yep, great.
Awesome. You mentioned product ops, so I'll jump into that question next. So any recommendations on how to get alignment with senior leadership who are averse to product operations?
So getting alignment with senior leadership who are adverse. So
yeah, and Nick, I actually responded to your question asking if they've provided reasons why they're averse. If you want to send some more context in the chat, that might be helpful for answering this question.
Yeah.
But Melissa, maybe we can just frame it as like, how do you pitch the value that product operations can bring to a product organization?
Yeah, I'll tell you too, like what I hear as for people not understanding product operations too. Yes. Okay. So yes, I also hear things like that's the director's VP's job. So I see those coming in. Product operations whole point is to enable strategic decision-making, right? So that's what we have to think about. Now, the number one reason why I hear product managers say they can't talk to customers, or they would like to be more outcome focused, or they would like to be working this way, but they can't, is because they don't have time. So then I ask them, what are you spending on all your time on? Recruiting people for user research, answering questions from developers, gathering the data to actually like make the decisions. Some of those are process related, and it's like you didn't do enough context building to really set the direction with the developers, so they're asking you too many questions. Some of it is systems related, where it's like the organization was not set up well to distribute data to you so that you can make informed decision making. You don't have the right cadence for reviewing those things. You don't have standardized templates that allow you to communicate and compare product roadmaps and strategy and all that wonderful stuff. That's the stuff that product operations helps with. It's like your job as a product manager is to make strategic decisions about how to deliver value for users. It's not to go into a SQL database and pull out data, which is what I used to do all the time when I was a product manager, because I didn't have the data. And it's like, I had to learn MongoDB once to get data out of a system to be able to make decisions. Like that should not be what I'm spending, 60 hours a month doing, but I had to do it to do my job well. That's where product operations helps. It's like, it allows you to do your job as a product manager, which is, like I said, making strategic decisions about optimizing customer value and business value, and not getting data out of systems and stuff like that. So that's how I pitch it. Now, is it a director's and VP's job? Some of it is from a perspective of like, setting the strategy, but it's not there. Like product operations isn't setting the strategy. They're not making decisions about the strategy. They're not making decisions about the product. All they're doing is giving you the right tools so that you can do that. And directors and VPs shouldn't be doing that. Like they shouldn't be building tools for people. Sure, they can determine what the process should be to follow for product development, but then you need somebody to help you codify that and decide like, hey, yeah, let's go use this road mapping tool, or like, let's use this portfolio management system. Like if you're doing that as a VP of product, then you don't usually have time to do all of your job as well. And I'd rather be paying somebody who's a VP of product to make strategic decisions more often than to figure out what format our roadmap should be in. It seems like a waste. It seems like a waste of money to me if I was like running a company. So that's kind of where I see product operations coming in. Otherwise, it's like everybody's spread really thin. And yeah, it used to be like that, where we all had to go, like I did, like dig through a SQL database and do MongoDB. It shouldn't be anymore. We have great tools out there. That's right. What we built them for, because everybody had the pain here. Why not implement them? Right? Like use them, because you're not in the business of making those tools. Like if you're not in the business of making a portfolio management tool, don't build your own portfolio management tool. Go buy one, so that you can make a decision about how to deliver better healthcare to doctors. Right? Like that's the types of decisions that we should be making, and that's where I think product operations becomes really important. If you are like the number one reason too, like I see organizations struggle, is they can't make decisions fast enough. So everybody adopted Agile to make fingers go faster on keyboards. It's very rarely that it's actually the developer's fault on why things can't get shipped. The developers actually can code pretty fast. It's usually the time to make decisions, time waffling about decisions, the times to figure out, is this the right decision? Like that's usually what slows down organizations. And if you can't make a decision, you can't build something, you can't get it out there, you don't make money. So that's where product operations to me becomes really important. It makes that go faster.
It is so true, Melissa. We did a research some time ago where we found out 80% of the delay in terms of the expectations and the people's impression of certain things go out versus not going out is because the decisions were made early enough. It didn't go through the design or discovery. It didn't get to developer in time. Now the engineering were behind. So the whole upfront work of decide what to do. There's like a 50% account for it. And the rest is really the discovery and design. So very interesting concept saying we don't have enough engineering resources. Meanwhile, they're sitting there trying to pull tickets from the backlog because they're waiting for the big feature decision to be made.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And a lot of times too, for newer teams, I'd say that are going through transitions, you don't see this in super mature product teams, but a lot of teams who are doing this for the first time, they're not creating cohesive product visions and like a big story to tell to the developers. So their backlogs become just laundry lists of requests or whatever they can really come up with. Because we're not making the decisions about what's the big vision for the product or how do we actually stop and take a couple steps back and actually put that together and go forward. So those are issues that I see too. And again, like the more data we have, the faster we can make all these decisions.
Yeah, and you actually touched on, Nick did respond with some more context and you touched on a lot of his points. So he said some of the challenges they've been facing is that the perception is it's too complex, there's too much upfront investment, it's too time consuming, and it's hard to convey the value of how and why to kickstart product operations.
Yeah, and I'll say I am writing a book on this. I'm dropping the little link in the chat, productoperations.com, if you want to sign up for it when it comes out. But we really talk about 3 different areas of product operations, and in the book we'll tell you how to figure out what to start with. And I'll say I never tell anybody to implement this all at once. Like this is not a ta-da, tomorrow we're going to do this all at once. Like you have to start with where's the biggest pain point on in our company. Is it getting the data? Is it streamlining user research so that we can actually be in touch with customers to talk to them? Is it our processes and tools? I know there's been like some debate out there about whether product operations is just about processes and tools. I don't think it is, but I do think people start there in larger companies because you can't actually make strategic decisions if there's 15 different formats of roadmaps floating around your company. How do you reconcile it? How do I know what anybody's working on? And how do I know if it's like this roadmap's good or that roadmap's good or this is what we should be doing? So I tend to see larger companies start with implementing processes and tools and standardizing that or standardizing roadmaps as the first thing that they do, because you need to be able to compare X to Y. Like you just have to be able to do that across an organization, especially if you're a leader. I need to look at that and have that be fully transparent. Fast growth scale up companies tend to start with data because they need to be able to see all of this data on like, percentage of customer segments that are adopting X, Y, and Z feature, like all those things I was just talking about before, but they need to be able to see those in real time because they make strategic decisions like quarterly. It's like, do we go up market? Do we go down market? Do we go after this? Are we acquiring this company? Like if you can't make those decisions, you're not scaling at the rate that like most VCs want you to scale at. So they tend to start there. Sometimes larger enterprises will start with like a streamlining customer research. If you ever have been told by your executives that I don't want you talking to customers because I'm worried you're going to bother them, or we keep bothering the same customers, it's because you don't have a good system set up to actually make sure that people can get in touch with a wide variety of customers. And that's where a bunch of the customer research, customer insights, and market research come from. I know Stripe started with that. So they were taking a lot of the feedback back from sales and streamlining it into a way where they could bring it to their product team. So lots of different places to start. Nobody goes, boom, implement them all at once. It's about like, what's the thing that's going to help you in the short term? And you go after that tactically.
Awesome. Okay. And then one more question on kind of roles. We had something come in around the CPO position. We've talked a bit about that today. He asked, in order to have a product-led organization, do you need a CPO or could that report up into the CTO? So I think as part of that answer, if you can kind of share on like how you position the need for a CPO within an organization.
Yeah, like a CTO is going to be primarily responsible for the technology. Now, that isn't to say that I haven't seen a hybrid CPO-CTO role work. There are people who are CTOs who are fantastically product-minded, very commercially driven. They make great chief product officers. And if you have that person, it can report to the same person. That person is always going to be the one who knows that product leads tech, though, right? If you don't have a CTO who understands that dynamic, that's when you need the chief product officer, because you can't have a hybrid CPO-CTO. Now, the pitch for a chief product officer is, you've got your CEO who's basically coming up with the vision of the company and thinking about your business strategy. Your CTO should be thinking about your technical strategy. Your CPO is making sure that all the software that you develop and build brings all your commercial activities to light. So like all the vision and all the stuff that your CPO wants to achieve, that's your CPO is kind of helping them do it. So it's like their right-hand person to do that. Most CTOs that I know don't think commercially about how the software is going to manifest and add revenue, reduce costs, protect revenue, and do all these strategic things in that area. That's what a chief product officer really does, is they are super commercially minded. They deeply understand tech. They deeply understand markets. They deeply understand product, so that they can formulate a product strategy that grows your company. And that's really what we're looking for in a CPO. If your CTO can't do that, that's when you start to look for a CPO. A lot of CTOs are more architecture, super technical, super great. Like, they're people I want to partner with. I want to work with them every single day. But if they don't understand strategy from adding a software perspective, or deeply understand the customer's needs and how to turn that into product, that's when you need a chief product officer. So I recommend that a lot of organizations need a chief product officer, probably more than not. Many super large companies too have CIOs even instead of CTOs, and that's such like a chief. If you guys haven't heard of that, chief information officer, there's another word for it. IT officer too. But those are that is an antiquated system. Like, nobody thinks about technology as information technology backends, run the servers anymore. Like, they see it as a strategic business driver. CPOs see technology as a strategic business driver. So that's the difference there.
Right. I definitely also see environment where you have just the scope of the work so large. There's a large mind share on the tech side. So then you need a CTO where you really focus on technology, the platform, and then you do have a CPO more focused on commercial and to tie everything together as well. So it totally makes sense in terms of, a lot of times it's really the needs, right? The needs to drive the position, as long as we can articulate what this position is going to contribute to the needs and filling the gap.
Exactly.
Okay, now switching gears to tools a little bit. So we had a question come in that said, you've mentioned tools like Jira, Dragonboat, and general road mapping tools. Which types of tools do you view as core and essential to product management?
Yeah. Ooh, good one. Kind of whatever you need. I feel like you need, we all know we need a ticket management system like Jira. Pretty easy. You use Trello. I don't really care. Whatever works for you. But I will say, since I've been doing deeper product ops, one of the biggest things that I learned is, like, you need to get the data out of the system. And that's why most people adopt Jira, because you can actually get information out of Jira and dump it into different systems or connect it with different systems. So that's something definitely to look for. I will also say, like, a lot of companies I've heard are proponents for, let the teams figure out, like, what are self-organizing teams, right? They'll say this from Agile, use whatever you want. Doesn't work when you start to scale, right? If you have one team using Trello, one team using Jira, one team using that, 14 different product road mapping systems, as a chief product officer, you can't pull everything together. And again, I was talking about this before, but, like, what's going on? I have no idea. How do I make decisions? So that's where tool choices actually become pretty critical. So you're going to want things that work really well together. So that's number one to really look for. But I think you're going to need at least a place to log the work that's going on and who's working on what, so you can do capacity planning, and so you can see what's in progress and you can prioritize backlogs. You're going to need things to do product roadmaps in it. You're going to need a portfolio management tool that really tracks your strategy, your OKRs, your progress towards your goals there. So that kind of connects all of your strategy and your roadmaps and, like, to the work, what is going on. On the other side, you're going to need analytics tools that tell you what your customers are actually doing. So your things like Amplitude or Pendo or whatever you have out there to really track the activity through people, for people going through your products. And then you need, then you've got, let me think. Those I think are absolutely essential. What else am I missing, Becky, that you could think of?
I think you covered all of them. If I were to say more things, like your team's productivity tools, with Figma and whatnot. But not so much.
Yeah, Figma, those types of things. I love Figma. I did a whole redesign for a platform when like I said, I used to do UX design too. I did a whole redesign for this platform back in 2012, I think it was, or 2014, and I had to, like, literally be like 2 pixels for the horizontal line that goes here in this, like, 80-page deck, and then Figma comes out, and I was like, "Where were you?" 2014. I was like, oh my God.
I'm going to throw one more question in. We've had a couple questions about Dragonboat. So how would you describe the value of Dragonboat to product managers? And is Dragonboat only for senior product people, or can it be for the whole product organization? And Melissa, maybe you share how you describe Dragonboat to product managers, and then Becky, you can share the use case across the organization.
Yeah, I think for me, like Dragonboat, even if you're just a first-time PM, it's like we need to understand how we're all contributing to the strategy, right? And how we can all help further this company. That's what Dragonboat helps you do. It helps you understand like how all of the things that you're working on ladders up into the big company goals and how that looks across the portfolio. Now, as a team level product manager, you may not be making strategic decisions about what you start and stop, but you need to understand how you fit in the picture. And that's where Dragonboat is like really helpful. And then as a product leader, I need to be making those decisions about what do we start, what do we stop, what do we change, how do I move people around? And that's what Dragonboat allows you to do. So it helps you just really get a good handle on what's my portfolio, how's it contributing to the success of our company, and how do I make that transparent? So that's how I usually describe it to people.
Right, that's spot on, Melissa. Thank you. So yeah, so Dragonboat really is built as a tool for the product organization, regardless of your one PM team or many hundreds of a PM team. What that is as a product organization, you do have the customer side of customer value and the business value, and then and ultimately that connected to your product and features and roadmaps. So how do you tie these different dimensions of a data and decision you have to make? Use that, tie your goals and strategy to the work. And then you go to obviously figure out where you allocate your resources, where your bottleneck is, and see the outcome of your product, and then connect back to say, how do we adjust our roadmap? Now, all these are just the product outcome. We're not even thinking about the engineering side, right? Engineering side is also part of the decision. As you make a prioritization decision, allocation decision started to build, you're never on time. Something changes, something coming to the roadmap. How do you make decision, right? So Dragonboat allows you to have the visibility so quickly and in real time. You can make a decision and trade-offs quickly, regardless of your individual product manager or product organization with the hundreds of product managers. You need the visibility and alignment to say, this is the best way to achieve our goals. Here's things on fire. Here's how we're going to make trade-offs so that we can move forward as an organization to achieve the best we can.
Wonderful. I know we're on time. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. Becky, thank you for leading the conversation. And we have tons more questions that came in, so we have them all tracked. We'll try to follow up with everybody and make sure that all the questions are answered after the fact. Thank you all so much for your engagement. Great to see you, and thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.